You ever have one of those mornings so perfect? You swear nothing could ruin it? It was a Sunday. Early summer. The sun was still low, brushing the lake with that soft golden light you only get for maybe 20 minutes a day. I was sitting on the old wooden dock behind my cabin, a thermos of black coffee by my side. Line cast lazily into the water. Just me, the breeze, and the occasional ripple from a lazy fish down below. Fishing wasn't just a hobby for me. It was a ritual. Therapy. A sacred pause in a world that never seemed to slow down. At least, it used to be. Because right as I leaned back, feeling that peace seep into my bones, I heard it, the unmistakable hum of a golf cart engine, tearing up the gravel path like a bat out of hell. I turned my head and there they were. 3 of them. Karen, bleach blonde, 50-something, wearing a wide-brimmed visor and wrap-around sunglasses, perched in the passenger seat like a queen surveying her peasants. Next to her, Rick, a pot-bellied man in a security volunteer vest 2 sizes too small. And driving, Marcia, clipboard already in hand, mouth set in a grim line like she was ready to write me a parking ticket on my own property. The golf cart screeched to a halt. Karen jumped out like she was leading a raid. I didn't even move. I just sipped my coffee and waited. Sir, Karen barked, pointing a manicured finger at me. You are in direct violation of HOA Regulation 14B. Unauthorized extraction of natural resources. I blinked at her. You mean fishing? Rick puffed up his chest. This lake is protected, sir. You can't just harvest wildlife without permission. I had to fight the laugh that was clawing its way up my throat. You're joking, right? I said, slowly reeling in my line. I've been fishing here for years. It's my dock. Karen strutted forward, tapping her clipboard like a drill sergeant. Irrelevant. Under the revised HOA bylaws, all bodies of water within the subdivision perimeter fall under community management jurisdiction. Unauthorized activity is subject to penalty. She tore a bright yellow citation off her clipboard and slapped it against my chest so hard I almost dropped my thermos. $1,000 fine. Effective immediately. I stared at the paper, then back at her. You seriously think you can fine me $1,000 for fishing on my own dock? Rick crossed his arms smugly. Rules are rules. Should have read the latest HOA bulletin. Marcia chimed in, her voice nasally and officious. Ignorance is not a defense. It was almost funny. Almost. Instead, I took a long, slow sip of my coffee and stood up, towering over Karen and her 2 loyal stormtroopers. You 3 might want to back off, I said, voice calm but edged with steel, because I'm about 2 seconds away from calling the sheriff and explaining how a bunch of HOA volunteers are trespassing to harass a homeowner. Karen smirked. We're empowered by the board. We have enforcement authority. Enforcement authority doesn't cover harassment, I said, or illegal citations. She waved a dismissive hand, turning on her heel. You have 30 days to pay or face escalating penalties. She called over her shoulder as they piled back into the golf cart. Rick revved the tiny engine like he thought it made him sound tough. As they sped away, leaving a cloud of dust in their wake, I looked down at the crumpled yellow paper still clutched in my hand. $1,000 fine for fishing in a lake that sat right behind my own cabin, on a dock that I had rebuilt with my own 2 hands. I shook my head, the anger burning low and steady in my chest. They thought they could bully me, shake me down with made-up rules and threats. They thought I'd just roll over and cut a check. But that's the thing about people like Karen and her merry band of HOA vigilantes. They're so used to people folding. They don't know what to do when someone decides to fight back. And believe me, I was just getting started. After the ridiculous $1,000 fine fiasco, I spent the rest of Sunday stewing. Not furious. Not yet. Mostly curious. The kind of curiosity that doesn't just itch, it burns. How could they fine me for fishing on my own dock? How could they claim control over something that had been untouched for as long as I'd lived here? The more I thought about it, the more something didn't add up. So the next morning, I decided to find out for myself. I drove down to the county clerk's office, a squat brick building that always smelled faintly of old coffee and damp paper. The clerk behind the counter barely looked up as I walked in. "Morning," I said, flashing my most polite smile. "I need property records. Specifically anything related to parcel 309B. That's the lake behind Meadow Ridge Estates." The clerk grunted and tapped away on a keyboard that looked older than my truck. "You an owner?" he asked, without looking up. "Something like that," I said. He printed out a thick packet of documents and slid them across the counter. "Good luck," he muttered. "That file's a mess." Oh. He wasn't kidding. I spent 2 hours at a little side table, flipping through papers yellowed with age, hunting through bad scans and barely legible signatures. And that's when I found it. Buried in the back, behind a mountain of amendments, plats, and outdated easements. The lake was originally part of a private land parcel owned by a development group called Bayside Holdings. When Meadow Ridge Estates was built 30 years ago, the developers had leased the lake for community use. Leased, not sold, not deeded, not even partially transferred. They never finalized the purchase. There it was, plain as day, signed and stamped, community recreational use agreement, non-exclusive, term limited. The term limit, 20 years. The expiration date, 10 years ago. I sat back in my chair, heart thudding with a slow, dawning realization. The HOA didn't own the lake. They never had. And for the past decade, they'd been operating on nothing more than assumptions and wishful thinking. I snapped photos of every relevant page, printed out a copy for myself, and left the clerk's office with the kind of grin you usually see on a guy who just found gold buried in his backyard. Driving home, my mind raced. They fined me for fishing on land they didn't even own. They posted rules, installed signs, handed out penalties, all without ever securing the basic foundation they needed to enforce any of it. They built their little empire on sand, and the tide was coming in fast. When I got home, I called Barry, my lawyer and an old college buddy. He answered on the second ring. "Dean," he said, "please tell me you're not calling about another fishing violation." I laughed. "Better. You're gonna love this. Turns out the HOA doesn't own the lake." There was a beat of silence. "You're serious?" "Dead serious. I've got the paperwork in my hand. It's still legally owned by Bayside Holdings, and from what I can tell, that company went dormant years ago. No maintenance, no taxes, no active management." Barry whistled low. "You're sitting on a ticking time bomb, my friend. If nobody claims it, and it's just hanging out there." He didn't have to finish the sentence. The possibilities were racing through my mind already. "What would it take to buy it?" I asked. "Depends. If Bayside Holdings dissolved cleanly, the rights would pass to their successor in interest, whoever inherited the corporation's assets. We need to track that down. But if it's just floating out there, you might be able to make a direct offer." "And if I owned it," I said slowly, "then every single HOA regulation, every sign, every fine, would be null and void." Barry chuckled. "Not just null and void. You'd have the right to enforce your own rules. No fishing permit required, except the one you write." I leaned back in my chair, staring out at the shimmering lake beyond my dock. They thought they had power. They thought they could slap fines and post signs and bark orders because nobody ever questioned them. They never expected someone like me to flip the script. I wasn't just going to defend my right to fish. I was about to own the battlefield. And Karen? Oh, she was going to lose her mind. While Karen and her army of clipboard warriors were busy printing out fresh no fishing signs and threatening everyone within a 5-mile radius, I was working on something a lot more permanent. The real war wasn't going to be fought on docks or Facebook message boards. It was going to be won in county records and ink on contracts. The next morning, Barry called me back. "Good news," he said, excitement buzzing through the phone. Bayside Holdings was inherited by a private trust out of Tampa. The family assumed it was a bunch of worthless, undeveloped land, They're sitting on it because no one ever asked about it. And the lake? I asked. Still technically theirs. No liens. No disputes. It's clean. And better yet, they're open to selling. I grinned so hard my jaw hurt. How much are they asking? I said. Barry laughed. Dean. They just want it gone. They offered it for less than what your pickup's worth. I nearly dropped my coffee. You could have bought a used car for what they were asking for an entire lake, and the 10-foot buffer zone surrounding it. The dock. The shoreline. Even the little stretch of woods where the HOA had so proudly planted their official kayak rack, all of it. Mine for the taking. Barry sent over the preliminary contract drafts. I signed the purchase offer faster than a kid signing for a new puppy at Christmas. We kept it quiet. Dead quiet. No public filings yet. No title changes in the visible system until the deal was finalized. The last thing I wanted was for someone in the HOA, Karen especially, to catch wind of what was happening. Meanwhile, the HOA was busy doubling down. Within a week, they had installed 2 new aluminium signs along the tree line. Fishing prohibited without HOA permit. Unauthorized access will result in fines and legal action. One of the signs was drilled directly into the dock post on my property. If I hadn't known what was coming, I might have blown my top right there. Instead, I smiled. Let them dig their own graves a little deeper. Every time Karen and her crew bragged about their lake enforcement authority in the group chats, I screen captured it. Every time they mailed out another threatening newsletter about violators, I kept a copy. All the while, the paperwork rolled forward. Tampa wasn't exactly fast. Those folks moved at the speed of humid molasses, but Barry kept pressure on them. And one sunny Tuesday afternoon, it happened. Barry called me with a grin you could hear through the phone. Dean, he said. Congratulations. You are now the proud owner of Parcel 309B, and everything within its surveyed boundaries. I stared out at the lake, heart pounding with quiet satisfaction. It was mine, legally, officially, not leased, not borrowed, not subject to HOA whims. Mine. The lake, the dock, the 10-foot perimeter of land around it, including the kayak rack, the trailhead, and yes, even the smug little bench Karen had installed with a plaque that read for the enjoyment of all residents. That bench, now sitting squarely on my private property. The possibilities were endless. I could have started tearing down signs that very day. I could have printed out copies of the deed and plastered them to every HOA bulletin board in a 5-mile radius. But that's not how you win wars like this. You win by letting your enemy walk right into their own defeat. So I kept fishing. Every morning like clockwork, I dragged my chair out to the dock, cast my line, and waved at Karen as she buzzed past in her golf cart, clipboard in hand. Anger brewing hotter with every glance my way. She thought she was wearing me down. Thought her fines, her warnings, her endless supply of petty regulations would break me. She had no idea she was fishing in my lake now. And pretty soon, the entire neighborhood was going to find out. Owning the lake wasn't enough. Not for what they had put me through. It wasn't about revenge, not entirely. It was about setting things right. About drawing a line so bold and permanent they could see it from space. The day after the deed transfer cleared, I made my first move. I called up a sign company, not one of those cheap plastic banner places. No. I wanted something that made a statement. Heavy duty. Weatherproof. Hand-carved wooden signs, stained a deep walnut brown, with bold white lettering that said, private property. No HOA access. Trespassers will be prosecuted. And below that, in slightly smaller but still very clear print, fishing permits available by private membership only. The kicker? Memberships required an application, and HOA residents were automatically disqualified. It wasn't spite, it was policy. By the following weekend, I had hired a crew from out of town, guys who had no ties to Meadow Ridge, to install the signs all around the lake. Every major trailhead, every dock entrance, every common path the HOA loved to pretend was theirs. They put in 10 signs in one morning. By noon, the neighborhood group chat was on fire. Screenshots of the new signs flooded in. People were tagging Karen left and right. demanding answers. Who approved this? Is this even legal? Why can't we fish anymore? I sat back on my porch with a fresh cup of coffee, watching the digital meltdown unfold like a 4th of July fireworks show. And right on cue, here came Karen, screeching up in her golf cart like she was reenacting the opening scene of a disaster movie. She slammed on the brakes so hard the little cart skidded sideways. She stormed down the gravel trail, face redder than a stop sign, clipboard waving in one hand. I walked down to meet her, casual as Sunday morning pancakes. "Dean," she barked, voice shaking with rage. "What in God's name is this? You can't just steal community land." I pulled out the manila folder tucked under my arm, the one with the shiny county stamped deed inside. "Oh, I didn't steal anything, Karen," I said, flipping it open so she could see. "I bought it. Legally. Officially. Fully recorded with the county." She sputtered. But this lake has always been Meadow Ridge property." "Nope," I said, tapping the paper. "Leased. Temporary agreement. Expired 10 years ago. You all just never noticed." "You can't ban residents," she shrieked. I shrugged. "Private property rights. Basic law. You guys taught me that lesson pretty well when you fined me $1,000 for fishing." Her hands shook as she flipped through her clipboard, looking for some imaginary rule that would save her. Rick and Marcia showed up a few minutes later, clearly summoned by Karen's panic texts. They stood there awkwardly, glancing between me and the signs, realizing the sinking ship they were now clinging to. "You'll regret this," Karen snapped. "The community will rally. We'll sue." I smiled politely. "You're welcome to try. But in the meantime, I suggest you respect the signs. Sheriff's Department has already been notified. First trespass warning's free. Second one comes with a court date." Her jaw dropped. "And as for fishing," I added, voice carrying loud enough for the few bystanders to hear, "permits are available. By private application. Unfortunately, current HOA residents aren't eligible. Club policy." The look on her face. It was better than Christmas morning. She turned on her heel and stormed back to her golf cart, muttering something about civil war and illegal seizure under her breath. Rick and Marcia trailed after her, but not before Rick gave me a sheepish nod, almost like he knew deep down they had pushed the wrong guy too far. As they tore off down the road, kicking up dust, I looked out at the lake. It was calm, peaceful, untouchable. The same place they once tried to police like little tyrants was now completely beyond their reach. And this time, the rules weren't just posted. They were carved into oak, signed by a judge, and backed by the full weight of the law. The lake was mine. The fishing was mine. And the so-called guardians of community standards, they were left standing outside the gates, staring in, exactly where they belonged. If you thought Karen and the HOA were going to take their loss gracefully, you don't know HOA people. They went into full panic mode. First came the emergency meetings, hastily organized in the community clubhouse, with Karen standing at the podium waving her clipboard like it was a weapon. "We will not surrender," she bellowed, voice cracking under the strain. "We must reclaim our lake. It is part of our community heritage." The few loyalists still hanging around clapped weakly, but you could tell the spirit was gone. The rest, they shifted awkwardly in their folding chairs, whispering to each other, wondering why they were being dragged into a losing battle. Next came the legal threats. Karen announced they would sue me, for improper acquisition, for community asset theft, even for public nuisance. Barry, my lawyer, just laughed when I showed him the letter. "Dean," he said, "this isn't a lawsuit. It's a tantrum with a header." He drafted a polite but firm response, attaching copies of the deed, the expired lease agreement, and a lovely little citation of the state's private property protection statutes. We sent it certified mail. Never heard back. Meanwhile, Karen tried to whip the neighborhood into a frenzy. She printed flyers, posted rants on the HOA Facebook page, even tried to organize a protest march around the lake. 9 people showed up, One brought his dog. They walked in a sad little circle holding signs like "Our Lake, Our Rights," but stopped cold when they hit the new property line signs and saw the sheriff's cruiser parked nearby. Apparently, trespassing wasn't on their to-do list that day. Behind the scenes, the real damage was even worse, for the HOA. That is, word spread fast. Homeowners who'd been on the fence for years finally had an excuse to walk away. I started seeing for sale signs pop up all over Meadow Ridge. Families moving out, citing community management issues in their listings. Even longtime residents, folks who once defended the HOA, started showing up at county meetings, lobbying to dissolve the board entirely. Karen? She was losing her grip faster than sand through a broken hourglass. One night, I heard from Marcia, remember her? Karen's clipboard-carrying sidekick. She showed up at my dock with a six-pack of craft beer and a guilty look. "We never knew," she said quietly. "Karen made it sound like you were the villain. We were just trying to protect the neighborhood." I shrugged. Sometimes protecting something means knowing when to let it go. She nodded, cracked open a beer, and sat down beside me as the sun dipped behind the trees. We didn't talk much after that. Didn't need to. The lake shimmered in the dying light, calm and perfect. Mine. No HOA patrols. No angry notices taped to my door. No golf carts revving down the trail like stormtroopers on a power trip. Just the sound of frogs, the occasional splash of a fish, and the soft creak of the old dock under my boots. I had turned their weapon, their obsession with control, against them. They tried to fine me for fishing. I bought the lake. They tried to ban me. I banned them. And in the end, it wasn't just about winning. It was about building something they could never take back. I wasn't just fishing anymore. I was living on my terms. By late summer, the HOA was a hollow shell of what it once was. Karen resigned, not officially, of course, but by simply vanishing. No more meetings, no more memos, no more surprise inspections. One by one the rest of the board members faded away too. The community clubhouse stood empty, its windows dusty, its once proud banners sagging in the heat. Meanwhile, Lake Liberty, because yes, I named it officially, was thriving. The private fishing club had grown from a handful of members to a waiting list stretching into next year. Families from surrounding towns came to rent kayaks, fish off the dock, or just sit by the water and watch the sunset. And as for me, every evening, after the last guest packed up and the lodge closed for the night, I'd grab my old fishing rod, walk down to the dock, and cast a line into the water. No fines, no threats, no Karen, just peace. The kind you only earn when you stand your ground and refuse to let the bullies win. One night, a kid riding his bike past the lodge shouted, "Hey mister, is it true you own the whole lake?" I laughed and called back, "Every last drop, buddy." He whooped and sped off down the trail. I smiled, leaned back in my chair, and watched the stars come out over Lake Liberty, a place no HOA would ever control again.